On my 18th birthday, my parents called me into the living room for a talk and dropped the biggest joke of the year. "We are not your biological family. You were adopted." As if that weren't enough, they handed me a bag and said it was time for me to leave. I smiled calmly, of course. After all, they had no idea that I had already discovered the truth weeks before. I remember the scent of vanilla cake my mother baked that morning. She never cooked, not even during holidays, but she did for my 18th birthday. I should have realized something was off then. They waited until the afternoon. Still in my pajamas, I was summoned to the living room by my father. He didn't look at me. My mother stared at her lap, lips pressed tight. I felt a heaviness in my stomach before I even sat down. "Sit," he said, his voice as cold as when he scolded me for spilling milk as a child. I stayed composed. Emotions were best hidden around them. Then came the blow. "You were adopted," my mother announced dryly, devoid of emotion or tears, stating facts like a court clerk. My father added, "We took you in when you were 2. Your biological mother couldn't care for you. We did our best." I froze. "We think it's time for you to find your own path," my mother continued. "You're old enough now." My father pulled a small travel bag from under the couch and slid it onto the carpet. "There's money and clothes inside. We've arranged for you to stay at a shelter until you find work." Just like that, they kicked me out on my birthday. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I stood slowly and thanked them with a faint smile. They didn't notice how tightly my hands gripped the bag's handle or the sharp glint in my eyes. What they didn't know, what they could never imagine, was that 3 weeks earlier, I'd found a letter hidden at the bottom of a hallway drawer. Inside was a birth certificate bearing my name and listing a woman named Margaret Vasileva as my mother. No father was mentioned. I researched her online, visited the library to dig through old articles, and what I discovered shocked me deeply. I hadn't told anyone yet. My biological mother hadn't been unable to care for me. They'd taken her away. Now, walking out the front door of the house where I'd spent my entire life, I didn't feel abandoned but ready. I wasn't leaving in shame, but with a plan. The shelter smelled of bleach and stale air, the kind of place people end up when they're out of options. The first night, I kept my back against the wall, clutching my bag as if it were priceless. In reality, it held only 2 changes of clothes, some crumpled bills, and that envelope. Everything that mattered. The next morning, I left before sunrise. I walked for an hour to the public library, my only safe haven. It was quiet, secure, and housed the archives I needed. I sat at the microfilm station, inserted the reel I'd stashed in my closet the previous week, and reread the same yellowed article multiple times, hoping the outcome would change. The headline read, "Local psychiatrist Margaret Vasileva committed after accusations of irregularities." The photo showed a young woman with dark eyes and delicate features, handcuffed but wearing an expression of defiance rather than fear. The text explained that she'd accused a renowned doctor, Richard Halverson, of abuse and unethical experimentation on female patients at a now-defunct clinic. He denied everything. A month later, Margaret was declared mentally unstable and sent for treatment at Silver Birch Psychiatric Center. No charges were filed against the doctor. Complete silence. That same doctor later became the head of the Halverson Wellness Foundation, to which my adoptive father frequently donated. I began piecing together the puzzle. I printed the article and tucked it into the envelope. The librarian gave me a strange look, perhaps noticing my trembling hands. Back at the shelter, I opened my notebook and wrote down everything I knew. Margaret had been a psychiatrist, institutionalized for trying to expose a powerful man, and had given birth during that time. Somehow, I ended up in the care of a couple connected to him. This wasn't a coincidence. That night, I couldn't sleep. The shadows on the ceiling seemed too alive, too close. I thought about her. Did she know I was here? Was she still alive? I needed answers. I needed to see her, to speak to her. But first, I needed to find out if Silver Birch Psychiatric Center still existed, and where it might be now. The next day, I started calling public records offices, mental health departments, anyone who might know where former patients had been transferred after Silver Birch closed. Most didn't even recognize the name, but one elderly employee hesitated upon hearing my question. She promised to call me back. 2 hours later, she did. There's a long-term care facility in Glen Ridge, about 3 hours north. Some patients from Silver Birch were quietly transferred there. In the 90s, no public records exist, but some are still there. I didn't ask how she knew. I just noted the name. Ridgeview Center for Behavioral Health. I had a destination now, but no car, little money, and no idea what awaited me. I skipped eating for a day, not because I couldn't afford it, but because I refused to spend. Nearly all the money my adoptive parents gave me had gone toward shelter fees and document printing. Every penny counted. I sat on the sidewalk near the library with my notebook on my lap, calculating my finances. The bus ticket to Glen Ridge wasn't expensive, but it might as well have been a plane ticket given what I had. I didn't want to steal, didn't want to beg, but I wanted answers. Across the street, a sign in a restaurant window read, "Help Wanted." I hesitated, then crossed the road. I asked to see the manager and offered to wash dishes, clean floors, do anything. He sized me up, noticed my dark circles, and said, "You start tomorrow at 6 a.m. I worked, 5 straight days, barely speaking to anyone. My back ached. My hands bled from scrubbing dishes with hot water and rough soap. But by the 6th morning, I'd saved $107 in tips and wages. It was enough. The bus to Glen Ridge departed at 10:40 a.m. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I simply went to the station, slipped the envelope containing the article about Margaret into my coat, and boarded. The ride was silent, passing through towns that seemed almost deserted, their streets still frostbitten, despite April. Ridgeview loomed atop a long hill, half hidden by trees. Its faded sign and peeling paint made it look less like a hospital and more like a forgotten mansion. The receptionist barely glanced up when I entered. Clipboard in hand, glasses low on her nose, voice tired, she asked, "What can I do for you?" "I'm here to visit a patient," I stated firmly. "Name?" she asked. "Margaret Vasileva." She blinked. "Relation?" I paused. "I'm her daughter." She studied me for a moment, then picked up the phone, dialed an internal line, and whispered something too softly to hear. Finally, she gestured. "Second corridor to the left, but make it quick." The door creaked open, like in a dream, and there she was, thin, gray-haired, sitting by the window, hands folded in her lap. She didn't turn when I entered. "Margaret," I murmured, my voice trembling. Slowly, she raised her eyes to meet mine, and for a moment, something flickered within them. Recognition? Pain? Perhaps both. She didn't speak, but didn't look away either. I approached, heart pounding. "My name is Nora. You had a daughter 18 years ago. They told me you were incapable, that you were dangerous. But I read what happened. I know what you tried to do. I know what they did to you." She exhaled softly, and something in her posture shifted. Her hands clenched. "They're still watching me," she whispered, almost inaudibly. "They think I don't remember, but I do." I froze. She remembered. But who were they? Margaret's eyes darted toward the door, then to the corners of the ceiling. No cameras were visible, but she looked as if she knew exactly where they'd been. Her voice was a whisper when she spoke again. "They recorded our therapy sessions, claimed it was for research, but it wasn't. It was for control. They created profiles. I saw things, heard things I wasn't supposed to." She paused, gripping one thin wrist with the other hand, as if trying to hold herself together. "Margaret," I began, moving closer. "Who are they? Is it the Halverson Foundation?" She flinched at the name, as if it triggered a physical reaction. Slowly, she shook her head, not as a denial, but as a negation born of fear. "Your father," she whispered, avoiding my gaze. "He shouldn't have taken you. He wasn't even on the approved list, but he used connections, sealed your file. I tried to stop him, but they'd already decided I was too loud. Too dangerous." My legs gave way. I sat beside her, struggling to keep my voice steady. "What were they doing, Margaret? What did Halverson do to those women?" She bit her lip until it turned white. "Experimental therapies, isolation techniques, memory suppression tests. It started under the guise of PTSD treatments, but it evolved. They tested drugs, manipulated behaviorally vulnerable women, addicts, inconvenient wives." "And you?" I asked. "I documented everything. I was young, idealistic. I thought ethics mattered. I sent a report to the state board. A week later, I was suspended, arrested, and then I ended up here." Her voice wavered and tears filled her eyes. I could tell she hadn't cried in years. She'd trained herself not to. "I begged to see you when they learned you'd been put up for adoption. I didn't know where or with whom. They told me I was a danger to myself. I never stopped wondering." I pulled the envelope from my bag. "You don't need to wonder anymore." She touched the folded papers as if they might dissolve between her fingers. For a long moment, she said nothing. "You shouldn't be here. If they find out you've found me—" "I don't care," I interrupted, firm now. "You're not crazy. You never were. I'll prove it." Margaret gripped my hand suddenly with surprising strength. "Trust no one with a badge or a white coat in this world." Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Her entire body stiffened. A shadow passed the door. She straightened, her eyes vacant, her posture perfect. The nurse entered, smiling faintly. "Sorry, visiting hours are over." Margaret didn't look at me again. She simply folded her hands and turned toward the window. I left, heart racing as I passed the nurse. She leaned slightly and whispered, "You're not the first to come asking about her, but the last girl never came back." She closed the door before I could respond. The cold hit me like a slap as soon as I stepped out of Ridge View. My breath formed vapor in the air, and my extremities trembled. Not just from the cold, but from everything. I'd heard. My mother wasn't a patient, she was a prisoner. I didn't return directly to the bus stop. Instead, I found a bench beneath a dead tree and sat, staring at the faded sign of the center on the hill. Another girl had come before me. Another person had tried to uncover the truth and vanished. The nurse hadn't said it as a threat, but it sounded like one. Back in Glenridge, I checked into a cheap motel with cracked wallpaper and a key that barely turned. I couldn't sleep. I spent the night scouring online forums, deep archives, even Reddit threads, searching for anything about Ridgeview, Silver Birch, or patients who'd disappeared without a trace. Nothing. It was as if they'd erased their history entirely. I shifted my focus to the Halverson Foundation. That name hadn't left my mind since I'd seen it in donation letters in my adoptive father's office. Their website was polished, full of smiling faces, wellness retreats, and carefully worded mission statements about holistic healing for women in crisis. A lie, a facade. I began investigating nonprofit records and tax documents. Then I saw it, a name buried in administrative paperwork. Thomas Brenner had signed off on purchasing research equipment for patient testing the year Silver Birch closed. My stomach churned. That was my adoptive father's real name. He hadn't just been a donor. He'd been part of the inner circle, a director in the group. He'd helped Halverson cover everything up. He might have even played a role in locking Margaret away, then taking me. I'd never been a gift, never an act of charity. I was a trophy of his success, proof that the system worked, that they could destroy one life and create another as if nothing had happened. Anger shook my body, but beneath it, a cold sense of fear began to grow. They had power, reach. They'd erased others before. That nurse at Ridgeview hadn't warned me out of kindness. She'd told me to run. But I wasn't running. I needed evidence. I combed through public employee records for Ridgeview and found a name, Janet Kell, the same one I'd seen on the badge. With some effort, I located her Facebook page. No posts, just likes and photos of her cat. But there was a clue, an old comment under a photo of a nursing conference. Someone had tagged her and written, "Still working nights at Ridgeview? Poor thing, that place is haunted." I messaged her. I didn't expect a reply, but I told her who I was, that I'd spoken to Margaret, and that I needed her help to expose the truth. An hour passed, then 2. At 2:14 a.m., a message arrived. "Meet me at the back entrance tomorrow at midnight. If anyone sees you, say you're lost." The wind cut like a blade that night, slicing through my coat as if it didn't exist. At midnight, Ridgeview looked different, as if the building itself were holding its breath. No cars in the parking lot, no voices, just silence and moonlit shadows stretching across the ground. I followed the gravel path to the back, avoiding broken stones and patches of frost. The door marked "Maintenance" creaked open before I could knock. Janet Keller was there, still in uniform, her expression tense and weary. Up close, she looked older than I'd imagined, not in years, but in the weight she carried, as if she'd kept too many secrets for too long. "You came," she said. I nodded. "I had to." She gestured for me to enter. "Speak softly. Some cameras are broken, but not all." We moved quickly through a narrow service corridor lit by flickering lamps. She led me through a small break room to an old archive room filled with metal filing cabinets. "I shouldn't be doing this," she murmured, unlocking the third drawer with a small bronze key. "But I've seen what they did to your mother and others. When that last girl showed up, I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would finally listen." I froze. "The other girl? What happened to her?" Janet pulled out a thick file and handed it to me. Claire Rothman, journalism student, brilliant, persistent. She was asking questions about Margaret and others who'd vanished from Silver Birch. She showed me court documents, recovered medical papers. She was close. What happened to her? She came back for a second visit. That night, her apartment was broken into, her laptop and files stolen. She told her roommate she felt followed. 2 days later, she disappeared. The police classified it as a voluntary disappearance, but you don't believe that, I finished. "No," Janet said softly. Claire was scared, but not the type to run. I opened Margaret's file, pages and pages of notes, all stamped in red. Incompetent, delusional, paranoid. The language was clinical, cold, manipulated. She wasn't delusional, Janet said. She was sane. The day before her commitment, she filed a complaint with the medical board, the Baribat. Next day, she was labeled a threat. I flipped to a photocopied, handwritten report signed by E. Vasilieva. It described unauthorized drug tests on patients without legal consent, overseen by Halverson. Why didn't this come to light? Janet shook her head. The Foundation's reach is vast. They fund hospitals, universities, even political campaigns. If you try to use the system, they'll erase you too. I won't use the system, I replied, folding the report and tucking it into the inner pocket of my coat. I'll burn their house down from the outside. Janet hesitated, then pulled something from her bag and handed me a USB drive. This contains internal memos, scanned patient files, Margaret's reports. If you're serious, you'll need it. I am. She stared at me. Then be smart, and don't come back here. Exiting through the maintenance door, I realized something had changed. I was no longer just a girl seeking answers. I was a threat. And strangely, I wasn't afraid. Not yet. I didn't return to the motel. Instead, I spent the night in a corner of a 24-hour cafe in a nearby town, drinking coffee I couldn't pay for and staring at the USB drive in my hand as if it were a live wire. I didn't have a laptop, only my phone. I couldn't risk connecting the device to anything traceable. By noon, I'd found a used electronics store, paid cash for an old Chromebook, and took it to the public library. I sat behind a shelf of forgotten biographies and plugged in the USB drive. It took 3 minutes to load, then file names appeared: patient logs, notes on experimental treatments, foundation memos, private videos of Dr. RH, internal transfer reports, E. Vasileva. My throat went dry. I opened the patient logs first, pages of cold clinical notes, coded references to sedative tests, regression therapy, behavioral compliance sessions. Some ended with, subject transferred to long-term confinement after non-compliance. Names were replaced with numbers. Then came the foundation memos, many digitally signed by Thomas Brenner. Patient EV remains a reputational threat. We recommend continued confinement and status quo. One internal report mentioned Claire Rothman, suggesting possible exposure in 2008. Spotted, controlled. My hands trembled as I opened the folder titled Private Videos of Dr. RH. Dozens of videos, untitled except for dates. I clicked on one from 2005. A dark room, a woman strapped to a chair, speaking slowly, a man off-screen asking calm, manipulative questions. "Do you think we're here to hurt you?" It was Margaret, the familiar, cold voice of Halverson. "No," she murmured. "You're helping me forget." I slammed the laptop shut. This wasn't therapy. It was programming. It was time to act fast. I contacted every independent journalist I could find, sent anonymous forum posts, whistleblower forms. I even emailed the entire contents of the USB drive to a temporary email linked to a podcast I'd once listened to about whistleblowers. Most didn't reply, but one name caught my attention. Rachel Ashby, a former investigative reporter fired years ago for pursuing a story about unethical psychiatric treatments in government facilities. Rumors said she still dug, even off the radar. I messaged her. "I have evidence of state-sponsored experiments on women. I have names, videos. I think a girl named Claire Rothman tried to reach you once. She disappeared. Please help me." I expected silence, but an hour later she responded, "Where are you?" "I've been waiting for this for 15 years. Rachel Ashby didn't live in a city. She lived in an isolated cabin on the edge of nowhere, 3 hours from the nearest Starbucks, surrounded by dense pine trees like secrets. Her voice on the phone was low, direct. "Leave your phone in the glove compartment. I'll meet you outside." I followed every instruction. When I arrived, she was already waiting on the porch. 50-something, piercing eyes, skin weathered by the wind. She didn't smile. Inside, she acted quickly. No greetings, no tea, just locked the door, grabbed a dusty laptop, and said, "Show me." I handed over the USB drive. She plugged it in, showing no reaction as she scrolled through the files. Only slow, deliberate breathing when she saw Claire Rothman's name. "She called me once," Rachel murmured. "She said she was scared, that she was being followed. I offered to meet. She disappeared before we could." She paused, looked at me. "You're not just risking your life. You're stepping into a war. These people think they've already won." "I know," I replied, "but I won't back down." She opened one of the memos and nodded. "These are real. The language, the headers. That's how the Foundation writes. You can't fake this." She clicked on one of the videos, watched silently, jaw clenched. When this goes public, someone's going to burn, she said finally. But we need to be smart. One wrong move and you disappear like Claire, or worse, like Margaret, alive but buried. She leaned, closer, her voice a whisper. We need to make this too big for them to control. Let's go to the right allies, retired prosecutors, whistleblower networks, and when we release it, it'll be everywhere, all at once. I nodded, but deep down, I knew we weren't just fighting for the truth. We were fighting for Margaret, for Claire, and for what remained of my stolen life. Rachel moved quickly. Within 24 hours, the USB drive had been duplicated 6 times and sent to 6 different people across the country. Former prosecutors, human rights lawyers, 2 podcasters, and an underground whistleblower platform. Each recipient received a unique password to unlock it, delivered via encrypted calls. That's how you kill a monster, Rachel said, by taking away its secrets. Meanwhile, she drafted a comprehensive report to accompany the evidence, connecting everything. She worked all night. I barely slept. The next morning, I woke to a voicemail from him, Thomas Brenner. His voice was firm, calm, as always, controlled, as if he'd already decided what would happen next. Nora, I know what you've done. I want to talk. You owe me that. I stared at the phone. My stomach tightened. I didn't owe him anything. Rachel looked up from her laptop. Don't go. But I had to. I needed to look him in the eye one last time. We met in a public place, an old train station, half abandoned, with cameras and witnesses. I kept my distance. He wore his usual beige coat and paternal smile, as if nothing had changed. You've become a smart girl, he said. No, I shot back. Don't pretend you raised me out of love. His face faltered. Do you think it was simple? Do you think I wanted this? No, I replied. I think you wanted control. He paused, then gave a slight nod. Everything you've uncovered, it's dangerous. Not just for me, for you, for Margaret. If you release it, people will get hurt. I know, I said, looking him straight in the eyes. They're already hurt. He took a step forward. This doesn't have to end badly. You still have time to stop. I didn't move. Then I said softly, It's already out. He froze. The calm facade cracked, revealing something colder. This will destroy you too, he said. No, I whispered. This sets me free. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. The news exploded 2 days later. It started with a podcast episode, raw audio filtered from the videos I'd retrieved. Then came the articles, the documents, scans of falsified patient records, whistleblower statements, an anonymous exposé on Claire Rothman's citing names. And of course, the video of Margaret in that room, her slow voice, her vacant eyes. People watched. People listened. By the end of the week, Silver Birch was trending. Within 10 days, the state attorney general announced a formal investigation. Subpoenas were issued. Thomas Brenner's name appeared alongside Richard Halverson and 3 others in a class action lawsuit filed by families of former patients. Nora didn't expect the world to care, but it did. Rachel kept her safe, hidden, as the media frenzy intensified. But Nora's thoughts never left Ridgeview. I have to get her out of there, she said one morning to Rachel, before they decide she's too dangerous to live. Rachel made a call. At dusk, they were on their way. Ridgeview didn't resist after the leak. The staff was scared, uncertain. Some had already left. Janet greeted us at the door and handed me a clipboard. She's been discreetly sedated, but remains lucid. You need to move quickly. I found Margaret in the same chair by the window. Mom, I murmured, kneeling. We're leaving. Her eyes were glassy, but her hand moved slowly, surely. She touched my cheek. You found me. I'll always find you, I replied, tears rising. No matter what they do. We left together, no alarms, No men in white coats, just the twilight light and the wind. The following weeks were a blur. Legal protection, medical care, trauma therapy, reintroducing Margaret to a world that had forgotten her. The trial was delayed, postponed, but not canceled. Thomas Brenner never called again. He was indicted 3 months later. Claire. Rachel kept digging. 6 months after the leak, a woman was found living under a false name in a small Oregon town. Nervous, cautious, but alive. Her name was Claire Rothman. Nora flew out to meet her. They talked for hours, not about what they'd lost, but about what they'd build together. My life seemed like a comedy of errors, until I turned 18 and discovered I was adopted. Yes, my dear parents waited for the perfect moment, my birthday, to give me the boot and a bag of clothes as an inheritance. The best present ever? They had no idea I'd already uncovered the truth weeks before. What a wonderfully poorly planned surprise, right? So, I decided to do some investigative tourism to find my biological mother, Margaret, locked up in an asylum for being too inconvenient. Turns out she uncovered some secrets about ethically questionable experiments led by the great Dr. Halverson, who, shockingly, was funded by my own father. Of course, because nothing screams loving family like baby trafficking and psychological manipulation. Am I right? In the end, I gathered enough evidence to bring down this horror show and even rescued my mother. Now I live in hiding while I watch the public downfall of those so-called charitable souls. Who would have thought my birthday gift would turn out to be freedom and revenge? Served ice cold, life is full of surprises. Or maybe it just has a very peculiar sense of humor.